Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Juvo Hub podcast. I am your host, Jonathan Sarr, and alongside with me is the magnificent Mark Howell from Howell Creative Concepts. And we appreciate you being on our show today. We know a lot of people use our content for training purposes. So if you haven't followed us on YouTube, make sure you do that. Subscribe to our channel there. That way you can be able to share this video with your team. And we thank you also for those who like it in the podcast version. You can go to any of your podcast stations and subscribe to Juvo Hub. You'll find us there. We're busy on social, so we'd love to hear your feedback about anything on the show. So find us on Instagram at Juvo Hub. And if you want to make sure you never miss out on any of our content, you can go to juvohub.com/newsletter and you can sign up for the newsletter there. So today, Mark and I are talking about presentation skills and some of the top skills that you need to be thinking about. We're going to focus on 5 today and why they're so important in property management. So Mark, you want to give us the list of our objectives for today?
Absolutely. Yeah. So look, I think that when we're talking about presenting a topic, content, if you're a trainer or speaker, and it's interesting, I heard there's a little bit of tidbit here that only 2% of the public actually either like to or can do this. Only 2%. So that's very, very few people that actually enjoy being a public speaker. Or even maybe a trainer of sorts. But so when you are going to take on that challenge, for me, these top 5s are very, very important, very key, but it's being truly authentic, being you, being who you are. And for me, if anybody knows me, I always like to add humor into anything that I do, because I just don't think we need to take so much of our lives so seriously. So I try to have a little bit of authentic me and adding that humor in. But your poise, just how you're presenting yourself, bringing your passion into that topic, that content, connecting with your audience, meaning the relevance too, not just eye contact, but is your content relevant to the people that are in your audience, and then keeping things simple.
Yeah, great objectives, common ones, and ones that I know both you and I, as industry speakers, it's not something that you can just pick up right away. We're still working on our craft, and we've been speakers for many, many years. So let's dive into the first one. Why is being authentic so important in presentations as a presentation skill?
Yeah. So for me, honestly, I think that's one of the first things. It's kind of like that first handshake, that first initial meeting of someone, when you only have that first opportunity to make a good impression, they say, right? So if something's unbuttoned or something's unzipped, it's the only thing you focus on, right? If you're not authentic, people see that. It's like having a button unbuttoned or something that is amiss, and your mind almost focuses on someone that does not feel truly comfortable talking about either that topic or just in general being there in front of others. It could be that sort of in your voice, the nervousness. And look, we all still get nervous. That's what I kind of think makes this fun. I love the nervous jitters before doing some type of engagement. But when you are truly authentic, meaning, hey, I'm just going to go out, I'm going to have a good time, I'm going to be me, that's when I find that I want to pay closer attention to actually what you're saying, because there's a connection there. I connect to truly authentic people.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. Like, it's sometimes, especially for if you're a new speaker, you feel like, well, like, what's my personality need to be like? Do I have to change things? And flattery is like one of the best compliments. And so I think we've all gone through that, where we've seen an amazing speaker and we've tried to imitate some of their styles and their approach. And that's okay, because it's working, it's good. The idea is to build your own. Like, yeah, take these tidbits that you learn, but especially for an audience that knows you, like maybe you are a trainer and the way you talk typically in the office is one way, and then you go up and train a class and it's like this completely different personality, then that can be a detraction to that presentation or to that kind of training session. So yeah, love it. So let's talk about our next one. Why is poise so important as a presentation skill? What are your thoughts on that one, Mark?
For me, I look at all of it. It's kind of like a package. It's a present. You sort of look at the way that it's been put together, the way that it's been wrapped. Then it's the excitement of unwrapping it and seeing what the gift is inside. It's not always about the gift. It's about the entire presentation. For me, poise is half of your presentation, making sure that your posture is nice, that you look nice, that there's not something that is a miss in that you're overdoing, maybe your clothes, your outfits, the colors. Like, don't put so much focus on what you look like during a presentation and put more about it in the content itself. So kind of reverse that. The gift is look at the present, look at how nice it looks on the outside, but it's a trick to that. When you're a speaker, you want it to be about your content, what you're actually talking about, but your poise, the way that you're standing, the way that you're holding yourself, the way that your body is moving in that space says a lot about your comfortability. I think also your authenticity. But if we're not very careful about that, sometimes people can make assumptions about how comfortable we are and what we're doing based on how our body language is. And I call that poise.
Yeah, spot on, spot on. When I think of poise, I often think of ballet. Like my little girl, she went to ballet lessons when she was really young, and I remember going to recitals. And I've also, we've seen the professionals do it too. And boy, it's like every movement rather is so clear and it's so crisp and it transitions well from one dance move to another. I don't remember the names of all of those different moves, but it's a work of art. And in that way, I see that relationship to poise when you are a professional speaker. It's just nice. It flows well. To your point, no detraction whatsoever. We're not trying to, by what we wear or our conversational manner, it doesn't take away from that presentation. And so that takes, like, you think from a ballet dancer perspective, the years of work it takes for them to be able to master that craft. And so we are working at our craft for years, but each individual presentation is its own craft. So
That's
preparation really is key to be able to feel comfortable with the topic, to not be so note bound that you're reading things word for word or reading a PowerPoint, but you have your objectives in your mind and you can easily kind of flow and transition from one main point to the next. And that just makes it so much easier for the audience to be able to connect with.
Absolutely.
So that moves us into, the next phase. In our opinion, it's like, well, what comes out of that? So we've got authenticity, we've got poise, and now we talk about passion. So if it's just facts, if we're just reciting material that is true and is factual, is that really enough? Why is passion so important in presentation?
Look, this is one of my favorite pieces of this conversation, and I have a tendency to go down a very deep rabbit hole on it because, I always feel like you should be passionate about what you do in life. If you are doing any kind of work, you should love that work. Find the passion every day in what you do, or go find the work that you can be passionate about. If you're not passionate about what you're doing today, then go find it somewhere else, right? So when I notice speakers will talk about topics that they don't seem very passionate about, I don't feel the energy, I don't feel the excitement. It's almost like a topic they drew out of a hat and they're just sort of muddling through it, or only throwing out data or statistics or numbers. And that to me is not, it doesn't catch my attention. It's not something that I want to focus on. Even if I didn't think I was going to enjoy maybe the topic that was being discussed, when I find that a speaker or presenter is very passionate about what they're talking about, I do somehow find ways to relate. And then I get more interested just based on their passion level alone. I teach this all the time with leasing consultants and managers and just leadership, that you have to teach your employees to find passion in everything they do, because we as individuals or as consumers, we can smell the lack of passion on you. I truly believe that go find the passion somewhere. And if you're talking about a topic that is more about numbers or data driven, then do a little more research. Find a way to, again, like we talked about the first step, the authenticity, being authentic, the humor of it. Find a way to fold that into who you are. I also find that when I have to talk about something that maybe I'm not completely passionate about, I find a way to bring it into some type of story that relates to me personally, or I do more research to find a way to kind of dig in to find more passion for myself.
Yeah. No, beautiful, man. No, I love it. I totally agree. It's the visual I always have is like of a gym instructor. So yeah, we could easily be at home and maybe you have an app for it. It tells you do 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups, 3 pull-ups, or whatever. The list is there. And you can read that, but you be like not as motivated. Well, I got to 8 push-ups, so that's good enough, and kind of maybe even cheat yourself. What a difference it is when you're in front of an instructor, a gym instructor, and they're dancing and they're screaming and they got the music going and you could see their passion. You can see that they're in good shape, and you're like, you have something that is a visual in front of you. And boy, do you do all of that. You do everything that they say because you can feel it. You can feel that energy. So in the same way with presentations, it's more than facts, as you mentioned. We want our audience to be able to leave the room with, okay, I'm going to do this today. This is what this was my takeaway from this event, and apply it. Otherwise, we haven't done our job as instructors. It is our job. I feel is so important that we motivate people to action in some way.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So that leads right into, well, how do we go about doing that? So passion now brings us to our 4th point, which is connecting. What are your thoughts on, making sure that passion isn't so over the top that it's distracting, but it's channeled in a way that we connect to our audience, that we're relevant? Why is that an important skill set also?
Look, I think it's interesting as presenters, or most presenters, speakers, we do it because we like to talk, I guess, right? Or we like the attention. I don't know. I don't necessarily love the attention of it, but I do love to talk. But what I also know is that other people like to talk too. And what I have learned just about social awareness and emotional intelligence is people love to talk about themselves. But when I think about content in a speaking arena, I always want to embed types of questions, group discussions in my segments, because the more I can get them talking, the more I know that they're hearing and absorbing and feeling the passion behind it. It's not just about my life experiences or what I want you to know about me or how I feel about this topic. And I always usually like to tell people, I don't know everything about everything, right? So I know maybe a little bit about a lot of things, but we can learn from each other by sharing our experiences. And so when I teach, I always try to embed some type of way to say, why don't you tell me about your experience? Or I ask a lot of questions to the audience, or I find one person that I can connect with and say, why don't you give me an example of what you've noticed about XYZ? What it does too, and I find this to be true, is that when one person in the group shares an experience that ties into that topic, it tells the other people that are in the audience, it kind of tells their brain like, hey, it's okay to speak up. It's okay to voice your opinion here or to have a comment. And it's funny. It usually starts this sort of trickle down. Sometimes you can lose your class by letting too many comments overrun. So again, like you said, this dance, you almost have to understand the dance of allowing that to even happen, because you have to know when to stop the extra comments, but I find that having them, the extra comments, is absolutely, it's a necessity. You have to
Yeah.
be able to have it.
Yeah. Yeah. So my takeaway from your comments is involve the audience. That's one of the ways you can connect, involve them in a balanced way. So it doesn't, again, doesn't become a distraction. Whenever I think, Mark, of connecting to an audience, I think of like audience contact, just the real simple things. So when we're one-on-one, if we're not balanced in the way we use that type of eye contact, it can be a train wreck. If you sit there and stare at someone and don't move your eyes, that's creepy. But if you're talking to someone but you're not looking at them, then that means you're disinterested. You're not really invested. And so to me, part of connecting the audience is finding that balance depending on your classroom. And this applies even to large audiences. You need to carefully kind of like move through the audience, make a point, make eye contact maybe with someone for a split second, then you move over to someone else, and you kind of work the room, work the audience, and that way everybody feels like you are talking to them but not talking at them necessarily, in a nice balanced way. So nice fourth tip there. Good skill set to have in presentation skills. And that leads us to our fifth and final one for today, and that's simplicity. What's your take? Why is that so important, Mark, to have to maintain a simple approach to presentation?
What's the old thing? This probably is going to date me, or maybe we still use this, the KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I think it was a great lesson. You don't have to overdo any type of presentation or even conversation. I find it very interesting when people use words that, look, I love that we learn new words, we learn new phrases, and we want to embed them into our daily conversations. But you have to ask yourself, is this audience going to understand the words that I'm using? And you have to ask yourself, am I speaking their language? And so when I think about keeping it simple, you really do need to know your audience. You need to know, who is it that I'm trying to, reach out to here. And keeping it simple means that you're using layman's terms, that you're not just throwing a bunch of data and numbers, but you're actually talking in their terms, their language, their lingo. So I find that I don't try to put a lot of words on my presentations either, because then that is also distracting. The more words that are on the screen, people feel like they have to read along, and nobody wants to be read to. Right. So I keep things very simple for myself by just using imagery, a picture of something that I know will trigger my brain to take me down a path of something that I know I'm passionate about. But I find it fascinating when I hear people using big words that don't necessarily need to be applied. And I look around and I'm thinking, did you lose your audience by trying to use these big words? Because now they don't know really what you're talking about, or maybe you've lost them in that sentence somewhere. And now they're focusing on the fact that, well, why don't I know what that word means? Right. I've done it, like, look, some people use words that I don't even know. And I'm like, I find myself thinking, I'm gonna have to go back and look up what that word means and how is it used in the sentence. And then I find myself focusing on that rather than the speaker in general.
Right. Yeah. How many times have you seen this, Mark, too, in the audience? It's like, huh? What'd they say? And they're on their phone looking it up. Yes. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Yeah. And they're trying to find it on their. Yeah. No, I get it. That's awesome. Yeah. We don't try and get too brainy up there. And I think too, sometimes presenters, they'll have like 100 slides, for a 30-minute session. And if you're one of those, your ratio of slide to minute is just so far off. You need to rethink whether or not you have a very simple presentation. Like even for this show today, we have 5 objectives. It's probably a 20-minute show or so, but we're focused on those 5 things and not trying to stuff every single presentation skill that's out there into our show for today.
That's right.
So that's part of keeping it simple, is keep your audience thirsting for more. They want to walk away with, you know what, I need to do more research on that topic. I need to check out the references that the speaker mentioned or something along that line. And that way they're able to absorb it. Because if you try to put too much into a presentation, you're just going like such a fast clip, and it's just so difficult for an audience to try and absorb any of those things, right?
You know, I also think, I think it was part of this that, you know, knowing your audience, you just said this, you have to ask yourself before, or maybe while you're negotiating, what's the topic that you want me to talk about, or who is my audience in the organization? If you're bringing in different sort of team members into one team sort of training, then are all of the people that are in your audience, do they all care about the content or the objective here? So I always have to ask myself, how do I bring in, and I'm going to use an example of like when I'm doing a customer service training, or even just basics of the customer experience or leasing, and I want to bring the maintenance teams into some of my training, I have to make it relevant for them. So I always bring them into the fold. Like, this is where you come in. This is why this affects you. I talk in a way that says, this is why I've asked you to be in this class, or this is why your company has asked you to be here, because this content affects what you do, or you affect what happens during this content, right? And so you have to make sure that if you're pulling in different pieces of an audience, that it somehow comes full circle to them as well, or else you are going to see the little sleepy Joes in the room, people that don't find your content very interesting, or maybe your style, or asleep in your training. And believe it or not, I've had somebody fall asleep in my training too. And, you know, I feel like I'm pretty energetic, but I realized it taught me a very valuable lesson. I was like, either you didn't find this to be interesting to what you do, or I bored you. I don't know. But honestly, I found out later that he was just really tired. So you never know.
Yeah. Don't take it personal. It's, you know, that's probably another subject for another show on not taking it personal. And there's so many other topics, but this has been great. We've covered 5 key things for our audience today. Thank you for being here. So our objectives today: top presentation skills that we wanted to consider with you: authenticity, poise, passion, connect to your audience, and keep it simple. So 5 simple little tips. And we know we appreciate your support of this show. If you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube, remember to do that. Give us a thumbs up. We love the feedback. If you have any questions or topics you would like to have on the show, let us know. We would be happy to consider those. Mark, where can people find you online?
Absolutely. Yes. So howellcreativeconcepts.com. Howell is spelled Howl, and then that's creativeconcepts.com.
Awesome. So nice show, man. Nice feedback. Love it. Good class. We appreciate you supporting it. Until next time, class is dismissed. That is the end of episode 52. Take care, everyone.